Members, we're going to pass temporarily on file item 178. We're going to pass and retain on file item 179. We're moving to file item 180, AB 2260. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2260 by Assemblymember Wood, an act relating to emergency medical services.
Dr. Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. As many of you know, I represent the North Coast, which encompasses the northern half of Sonoma County all the way to the Oregon border. And due to the geographic remoteness of our district, air ambulances play a crucial role in emergency situations. When saving a life is on the line, every single second and minute counts and can be the difference between life and death. Air ambulance providers should only have to focus on getting to a patient as quickly as possible and not on unnecessary administrative burdens. AB 2260 requires that the Emergency Medical Services Agency coordinates and makes consistent the data that air ambulance providers submit to local emergency medical service agencies. This bill will ensure a single data submission standard and eliminate the duplication amongst LEMSAs. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Dr. Wood. Seeing no discussion or debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tie the vote. Ayes 58, no 0. Measure passes. Passing temporarily on file item 181. File item 182. AB 2285. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2285 by Assemblymember McCarty and others, an act relating to state employment, making appropriation therefore.
Mr. McCarty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we know, former foster youth face great barriers in finding employment and face tremendous challenges as they enter society. 45% are unemployed, 30% are on public assistance, and one-third have incomes under $6,000 a year. So what this measure tries to do is find a brighter future for kids here in Sacramento, creating a pilot project for emancipated foster youth to enter the state workforce. It creates a 3-year pilot project with oversight with our Sacramento County Office of Education. I think it's an appropriate approach to help individuals become more productive members of society. Thank you. Ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. McCarty. Seeing no discussion or debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 61, no 0. Measure passes. File item 183, AB 2290. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2290 by Assemblymember Santiago, an act relating to pupil instruction.
Mr. Santiago.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 2290 seeks to update the world language standards. This bill has no opposition. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no discussion on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tie the vote. Ayes 57, no 0. Measure passes. Pass and retain on file items 184 and 185. 186 is AB 2329. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2329 by Assemblymember Bonilla and others, an act relating to school curriculum.
Ms. Bonilla.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 2329 requires the Superintendent of Public Instruction to convene a computer science strategic implementation advisory panel to develop recommendations for a strategic computer science implementation plan. This plan would have to be adopted by the state board and presented to the legislature by January 2019. Why is this important? Well, today we have 2 million high school students in California, and only roughly 55,000 of those 2 million high school students are taking computer science or computer science-related courses. And we also know that in the world of jobs in the future, today there are 86,000 IT jobs in the state of California that are unfilled. And looking forward, there's going to be 100,000 more IT jobs in the next 10 years. This isn't going to happen if we don't have a plan. There are hurdles and obstacles to us getting computer science into our classrooms. This panel would develop a sustainable and equitable plan. It would have representatives from the private sector, from our universities, from K-12 education. It's very, very important that we start now. We're already so far behind the curve when it comes to educating our students for the jobs of today and tomorrow. I ask for your aye vote for this measure.
Thank you, Ms. Bonilla. Seeing no discussion on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 61, no 0. Measure passes. File item 187, AB 2331. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2331 by Assemblymember DeBobney, enacting to dentistry, making appropriation therefore.
Mr. DeBobney.
Mr. Speaker, colleagues, currently dental students who go to a school outside of California only have one exam option to gain licensure in the state. AB 2331 will allow the California Board of Dentistry to recognize an additional licensure exam, specifically the American Board of Dental Examiners patient-centered exam. This exam process considers the patient's need throughout the tested procedure and improves portability for students who go to school outside of our state. Additionally, the legislation allows the board to seek outside funding for the costs associated with analyzing the ADEX exam to ensure it meets California's standards for admission to dentistry in our state. The bill has received no votes to date, and for this reason I ask for your support.
Thank you, Mr. DeBobney. Seeing no discussion on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 63, no 0. Measure passes. We're going to pass temporarily on file item 188. Moving to file item 189, AB 2348. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2348 by Assemblymember Levine and others, enacting to state government, making appropriation therefore.
Mr. Levine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 2348 takes a unique approach to tackling California's infrastructure funding problem. This bill allows the Department of Finance to guarantee the rate of return on CalPERS investments in California infrastructure projects. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Hadley, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The whole point of investing, colleagues, is that it's a positive-sum game where we invest money today to generate additional value tomorrow that can pay for our retirement obligations for our state and our local employees. This is a classic zero-sum game where we are asking California state taxpayers to guarantee a return to CalPERS for CalPERS money put up. Now, that may not be a bad idea. There may be investments that CalPERS wants to make that would be good for their return and good for the infrastructure needs of the state. But CalPERS is a fiduciary to its beneficiaries. They should be finding those on their own. We should not be trying to play matchmaker between state agencies guaranteeing a rate of return and CalPERS. Thank you.
Mr. Gatto.
Thank you. I rise in support of this bill. I think that the rate that might be paid might be a little bit higher, but this is a very, very creative use of the retirement investment ability, and I commend the author for bringing it forward. It's a very important bill.
Seeing no additional discussion or debate, Mr. Levine, you may close if you wish.
I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 62, noes 3. Measure passes. File item 190, AB 2350. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2350 by Assemblymember O'Donnell, enacting to English learners.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AB 2350 addresses the achievement gap between English learners and their peers by 1. Requiring that English learners have access to core curriculum courses and providing professional development for teachers on our new English language development standards. The achievement gap between English learners and their peers is one of the biggest challenges in our public education system, and early results of our ASPAC assessment suggest that the gap may be getting wider. AB 2350 addresses the key barriers to English learners' academic success. I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Seeing no discussion or debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 64, No, 0. Measure passes. File item 191, AB 2358. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2358 by Assemblymember Bigelow and others, enacting into public contracts.
Mr. Bigelow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to request an aye vote for AB 2358, which I am joint authoring with our colleague from Healdsburg. I ask today that you simply take a stand for our disabled veterans and small business community by voting aye on this important bill.
Thank you, Mr. Bigelow. Seeing no discussion on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 64, no 0. Measure passes. File item 192, AB 2411. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2411 by Assemblymember Frazier, enacting into transportation.
Mr. Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 2411 eliminates the transfer of miscellaneous revenue from the state highway account to the Transportation Debt Service Fund for general relief. This bill would ensure that transportation funds are used for transportation purposes. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Seeing no discussion on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 69, no 0. Measure passes. File item 193, AB 2759. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2759 by Assemblymember Levine, enacting into fraud, making appropriation therefore.
Mr. Levine, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill provides greater access to the victims of corporate fraud compensation fund. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 66, no 0. Measure passes. File item 194, AB 2809. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2809 by Assemblymember Rodriguez, enacting into developmental services.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to present AB 2809, a measure that addresses inequalities in access to care, treatment, and services primarily for children with developmental disabilities within our regional care system. AB 2809 addresses this challenge by ensuring that our state's limited English speakers and marginalized communities have information about access to programs in their native language. And for struggling working families, my bill requires senators to consider family hardships in behavioral programs that require parent participation. This measure made it out of Assembly Human Services Committee with bipartisan support. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Seeing no discussion on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 60, no 0. Measure passes. File item 195 is AB 2812. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2812 by Assemblymember Gordon, enacting into recycling.
Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Most state agencies have recycling containers for paper, but it might shock you to know that most state agencies also do not have recycling containers for materials such as plastic and metal products. State agencies that do have these recycling opportunities are generally employee organized and not required. In an effort to ensure the proper disposal of solid waste in state buildings and to further the California policy goal of a 75% state recycling rate, AB 2812 would require by July 1st, 2017, that CalRecycle develop guidelines to ensure that recycling containers are made available to employees of the state in state buildings. This bill has received no votes and is no opposition. I would respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. Seeing and hearing no debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 64, no 0. Measure passes. File item 196, AB 2817. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2817 by Assemblymember David Chu, enacting into taxation to take effect immediately, tax levy.
Mr. Chu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I appreciate your support on AB 2817. Last year, every member of this Assembly supported AB 35, and this is this year's version of that bill, to address our affordable housing crisis. This would expand our completely oversubscribed affordable housing tax credit to $300 million. This bill could have also been called Don't Leave Federal Housing Dollars on the Table, because it leverages 2-to-1 an additional $600 million if we are able to move with this tax credit, over $1 billion that would be used for much needed affordable housing. The only change between last year's bill and this year's bill is we increased by $25 million the farm worker tax credit. This was one of the bills that was vetoed by the governor last year. The governor, in his veto message, made it very clear that he wanted to see this tax credit move through the budget process, and I want to thank our colleagues in the Assembly Budget Committee for moving this forward. And we have to move forward with this given the affordable housing crisis, given the fact that in the state of California, we are suffering from the highest rents in the country, the highest home prices in the country, the highest rates of homelessness in the country, and the highest poverty rate in the country when you include housing costs. With that, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chu. Seeing no debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 66, no 0. Measure passes. File item 197, AB 2828. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2828 by Assemblymember Chow, an act relating to personal information.
Mr. Chow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Data breaches are becoming more sophisticated. Hackers are constantly looking for new and innovative ways to penetrate networks, such as gaining access to encryption keys to access encrypted data. For example, in 2015, criminals accessed personal information, including names, addresses, birth dates, and social security numbers of more than 80 million patients covered by one of the country's largest health insurance and health plan providers. The incident was one of the biggest thefts of healthcare data in history. Since that data was not encrypted, it triggered a breach notice to be sent to 80 million victims. Yet, even if encryption had been used, the data could still have been compromised because the hackers gained access to at least 5 sets of employee credentials or the encryption keys, which could have unlocked any encryption. So encryption by itself cannot stop the criminals if the hackers gain access to encryption key as well. AB 2828 expands data breach notification law, which currently requires notice to consumers of compromised unencrypted personal information to also include encrypted information if the encryption keys have also been compromised. With that, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
See no debate on the item. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 63, noes 1. Measure passes. File item 198, AB 2862. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2862 by Assemblymember O'Donnell and others, an act relating to pupil instruction.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AB 2862 authorizes the updating of California's academic content standards in visual and performing arts, ensuring that California students have access to modern curriculum and instructional materials in the arts. Extensive research demonstrates the connection between arts education and student engagement. I can assure you of that. Arts education contributes to higher test scores and reduces truancy and dropout rates. California's current standards and instructional materials were adopted 15 years ago and are certainly in need of updating. Since then, major changes have occurred in teaching and learning, leaving our standards outdated and out of alignment with other subjects. There is no authority in current law for the state to update these standards, so this bill is necessary to ensure that our students have access to the best education in the arts. I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Seeing no debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 68, noes 0. Measure passes. Pass and retain on file item 199. Moving to file item 200, AB 2892. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2892 by the Committee on Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials, an act relating to pesticide poisoning.
Mr. Alejo, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 2892 is a simple ESTM bill that simply extends the sunset date by 2 years on the requirement that certain pesticide exposure data is transmitted to the Department of Pesticide Regulation so that the state can continue to evaluate and improve its pesticide poisoning prevention program. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tie the vote. Ayes 63, no 0. The measure passes. File item 201 is AB 2900. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2900 by the Committee on Jobs, Economic Development, and the Economy, and act relating to economic development.
Mr. Garcia, you may open.
Mr. Speaker, members, AB 2900 establishes reporting requirements for state contracts with federal small business technical assistance centers, including the information on the number and types of businesses served. Organizations like the Small Business Development Centers, the Veteran Centers, and the Women Business Centers are an effective way to partner on the delivery of programs and services that benefit our small businesses. This measure ensures that consistent reporting across agencies and greater transparency as to which areas in the state are being provided services. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Seeing no discussion or debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tie the vote. Ayes 68, no 0. Measure passes. File item 202. We are going to pass temporarily. We're going to pass and retain on file item 203. But we are going to take up file item 204. That's AB 2485. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2485 by Assemblymember Santiago, and act relating to dentistry.
Mr. Santiago.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, AB 2485 updates the Dental Corp's loan repayment program of 2002 with revisions to ensure that the remainder of the funds in the dentally underserved account can be effectively distributed. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tie the vote. Ayes 70, no 0. Measure passes. File item 205, AB 2494. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2494 by Assemblymember Roger Hernandez and others, and act relating to community colleges.
Mr. Hernandez.
Mr. Speaker and members, Assembly Bill 2494 establishes the Veteran Resource Centers grant program under the Office of the Chancellor of the California Community Colleges. According to the California Community Colleges, an estimated 2.2 million veterans reside in California, and most of which are seeking an opportunity to access our community colleges. The number of veteran students is expected to increase dramatically as military personnel returning from Iraq and Afghanistan complete their service. As these veterans transition back to civilian life, many attend one of California's 112 community colleges. In fact, it is estimated that over 60,000 veteran students are enrolled in a community college today. These veteran centers assist veteran students in reentering the educational system by providing them additional guidance and counseling services. Recently, the Chancellor's Office released the Veterans Resource Center Review Project report, which cited the progress of several VRCs. This bill has received bipartisan support in each and every committee. We have taken amendments to reduce the cost to the state, including requiring a district matching fund requirement after the first year and establishing a sunset for the program. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Seeing no debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tie the vote. Ayes 70, no 0. Measure passes. Members, we are going to move back in the file to file item 199. That's 2883. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2883 by the Committee on Insurance, and act relating to workers' compensation.
Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a committee bill from the Insurance Committee. It passed unanimously, and it simply requires a study regarding the extent to which physicians' requests for authorization of medical treatment for injured employees may be processed using an entirely paperless system. I respectfully request an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. Seeing no debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 70, no 0. The measure passes. We are moving to file item number 206. That's AB 2499. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2499 by Assemblymember Mainshine and others, enact relating to crimes.
Mr. Mainshine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2015, the Department of Justice created the Sexual Assault Forensic Evidence Tracking Program, or SAFET, which would track rape kits in the analysis process. This, however, is for internal use only and does not permit victims to have access to the program and get information regarding the status of their own rape kit. AB 2499 would require the DOJ to establish a process by which victims of sexual assault may inquire regarding the location and information regarding their sexual assault evidence kits. I respectfully request an aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Mainshine. Seeing no debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 71, no 0. Measure passes. File item 207, AB 2506. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2506 by Assemblymember Thurmond and others, enact relating to student financial aid.
Mr. Thurmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise to present AB 2506. This is a bill that seeks to help our foster youth to be able to go to college. We know that young people who've been in foster care have historically had very low rates of going to college and completing college, but there are important programs like the Chafee funding that help to pay for their education and for their books. There's just not enough of it to go around, and this bill would expand Chafee funding so that more California former foster youth can attend college and so that the funds can pay for more of their educational expenses. The bill has also been crafted in a way to ensure that we support our students in going to institutions that have a good track record of graduating our students and that aren't gouging them with high loans. On behalf of California's foster youth, I'd ask for your aye vote on AB 2506.
Thank you, Mr. Thurmond. Seeing no debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 67, no 0. The measure passes. File item 208, AB 2515. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2515 by Assemblymember Weber, enact relating to water efficient landscaping.
Dr. Weber, you may open.
Yes, Mr. Speaker and members, I rise to present to you AB 2515, the outdoor water use efficiency. In 2007, the Department of Water Resources summoned an independent technical panel to provide recommendations to this legislature on new approaches on landscape water management measures. Recommendation 6.2 from the ITP public draft addresses improved effectiveness in the Model Water Efficiency Land Ordinance. The Model Ordinance is an important statewide tool to maintain continued focus and attention on improving water use efficiency of outdoor landscaping and irrigation. AB 2515 would increase the Model Ordinance enforcement by creating a consistent revision process in a triennial cycle that complements the Cal Green Title 24 Building Code triennial cycle. Synchronizing these updates would ensure that local government, landscaping professionals, plumbers, and residents all have the same information, whether they are looking at a model ordinance or the Cal Green building codes. AB 2515 is supported by the San Diego Water Authority and enjoys the support of the Sierra Club. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. Seeing no debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 67, no 0. The measure passes. File item 209 is AB 2548. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2548 by Assemblymember Weber, enact relating to school accountability.
Dr. Weber, you may again open.
Yes, Mr. Speaker and members, I'm here to present to you AB 2548, a bill dealing with school accountability, which clarifies how California's existing local control funding formula statutes would shape the implementation of the new federal accountability requirements pursuant to the Every Student Success Act, the ESSA. California's new multiple measure system of accountability needs to provide greater emphasis on growth, equity, and transparency in ways not currently being considered. AB 2548 will strengthen efforts in our community and across the state to increase equity and to close the achievement gap by creating a new accountability system that would provide parents and community groups and educators with critical information on the performance of schools and districts and their outcomes for all students. It provides transparent and meaningful comparison across schools and districts with respect to academic performance, student goal, equity, school climate, and student engagement, and it sets ambitious statewide standards for school performance and expectations for continued improvement. I'm pleased to say that the State Board has looked at ours and found some language and commonality there. AB 2548 is sponsored by the Children's Now and over 75 other educational groups throughout the state. I respectfully ask for your aye vote for AB 2548.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. Seeing no debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tie the vote. Ayes 62, noes 1. The measure passes. File item 210 is AB 2552. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2552 by Assemblymember Holden, enacting in public social services.
Mr. Holden, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise today to present Assembly Bill 2552, which provides a clothing allowance for foster children placed in families that are receiving support through the approved Relative Caregiver Funding Option Program. Relative caregivers are the backbone of our child welfare system. Relative foster placements are more cost-effective, tend to lead to better long-term placement stability, and offer foster children stronger connection to their community. The approved Relative Caregiver Program provides funding to these families, but it still does not equal to what they would receive with a non-relative. The clothing allowance would consist of an additional $240 a year for 3 years, distributed monthly in counties that have opted into the program. Recent amendments added a sunset date and clarify that the allowance is subject to available funds. Assembly Bill 2552 would go a long way to ensuring the success of the placement and assist the families in meeting all of the child's needs at a moment of placement. I'd like to thank you and respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Seeing no discussion on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 67, no 0. Measure passes. File item 211 is AB 2569. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2569 by Assemblymember Melendez, enacting relating to sex offenders.
Ms. Melendez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the intent of Megan's Law was to provide the public with information on the whereabouts of sex offenders in their community so that they can protect themselves and their children. Currently, sex offenders can be granted exclusion from this website if they are the victim's parent, step-parent, sibling, or grandparent. And bear in mind that 90% of victims know their offender. Over half of those are related to their offender. This bill will allow only offenders. This bill will only allow offenders to be excluded from the website if the local victims assistance center determines it's in the best interest of the victim, not in the best interest of the offender. This bill has received broad bipartisan support, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Melendez. Seeing no debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 69, no 0. Measure passes. File item 212 we will pass temporarily. We're moving to file item 213. That's AB 2589. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2589 by Assemblymember Gomez, enacting into public health.
Mr. Gomez.
Mr. Speaker and members, AB 2589 supports families through the development of key metrics and improved programmatic coordination that will increase enrollment in the Women, Infants, and Children WIC program and improve breastfeeding rates and improve health outcomes. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Gomez. Seeing no discussion on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote. You desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 67, no 0. The measure passes. File item 214, AB 2617. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2617 by Assemblymember Mays, enact relating to water.
Mr. Mays, you may open.
Thank you. AB 2617 will direct the Department of Water Resources to produce a report on water efficiency incentives like appliance rebates and turf replacement with the goal of identifying the most cost-effective options. This will help ensure that public dollars are used wisely. This bill has broad stakeholder support and no opposition. I respectfully request an aye vote.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mays. Seeing no discussion on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Aye 66. No 0. The measure passes.